Hi, I'm Tim.
And I'm Kathryn, and we're the Freed Family Farm. What are we going to talk about today, Tim?
Well, today we're going to talk about our plans for the garden and kind of what it's going to look like this year, and kind of where we think some things are going to be and what we're going to do with those.
Sounds great. How big is your garden? Our garden?
Well, our garden, we're expanding this year, as always, I guess. We kind of expand it, make it a little bit bigger.
Have we ever had our garden the same size 2 years in a row?
We might have, maybe from our second to third year. I think that maybe we had it the same size.
Okay, but like the first year was pretty small, and then we doubled that right away, right?
Yes. Yep. And yeah, so we're looking to continue to expand it this year. And we went out last week, and a week and a half ago, I don't know.
I was thinking it was over a week, but I don't know exactly how long.
We went out and we measured the amount of available space we have at our lot, and we're going to make it about 150 feet wide, which is about all the distance we have. We actually found we had maybe 147 feet of available space.
We're rounding up.
Yep.
We're calling it 150.
And then I think it's approximately 60 feet back or so.
Is that all the way or the partial? Because we have in our middle section, we can't go as far back as we can on the east and the west sides.
So that's all the way on the sides.
Okay.
And then but I don't think that includes like the strawberries, which are in the back of the garden.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we'll do more precise measurements later. And of course, this is all dependent on us getting it all tilled up and such.
It's going to be a big task.
And we have a friend from church who has offered to let us borrow his tiller, which is great.
Thanks, Fred.
So we're looking forward to that.
What do you feel like are some of the challenges with planning out the garden?
Well, this year we were looking at it, and as we were planning out, we kind of made a little grid here. I think Kathryn's hoping to do some pictures of it up on the screen. But as we were planning out, we realized feels like we don't have enough space.
Every year, even when we double it.
Which we're not quite doubling it this year, I don't think. It's close. But we go and we put in all the things that we think that we need. You know, we're trying a few new things and stuff like that, but also just expanding the number of people we're trying to reach with our CSA and with markets and such. And in doing so, we're finding that we're having trouble fitting everything in and finding spots for it.
And last year, some of the things like that we grew, we didn't get as much as we would have liked to preserve. Part of that was because I wasn't up for as much preservation energy wise, but also we just sold or put a lot of our things like cauliflower and broccoli went to the CSA or went to markets, and we didn't get to preserve as much as we would like ourselves.
Yes, and we've kind of been missing that with our freezer and grocery bill this winter, having not been able to get quite as much for ourselves as we wanted to. But I mean, we prioritize the CSA for sure and our members there.
Yeah. So yeah, wanting to make sure that we have enough space for some of those vegetables that we would use all year, especially.
Yep.
So, one of the things that we talked about that was different this year than we've talked about in the past was trying to sort our plants into the 4 categories. You had watched a video about this and how it would be good to rotate through these 4 categories. So we tried to do that. And what were the 4 categories?
Yeah, well, first off, in thinking about crop rotation, we know it's important, but it's also really hard to keep track of. So we kind of found we've not done a good job of it. Basically, in the past, we've been like, well, we didn't do this crop here last year, so we'll just put something else there. And we're trying to be a little bit more intentional without being super nitpicky. And so I had seen a video.
Can you pause? That's one of the reasons why we like to make a garden plan and not just throw everything in, is because we want to be doing well with crop rotation, but nothing ever goes the way we plan. So it ends up our plan from last year isn't actually what happened in reality. So we can't use the plan to make this year's plan because last year's plan is a wash. But I mean, that's one of the motivations we have behind making a plan for the garden, is wanting to be able to rotate our crops and have the soil be the best possible for each plant that we're putting in the ground.
Yeah, and so we want to do that, do what's best for all of that, but it's hard to keep track of, and you can look up a million different things. And so one thing that I had seen on, it's probably been quite a while ago, it kind of put the different crops into 4 different categories, and those are like the leafy vegetables, fruiting vegetables, legumes, and root vegetables.
And that felt kind of, I don't want to say simple, but it did feel like it would simplify the process for us to have the 4 categories, and we could just rotate whatever you saw. Also recommended like what order to rotate them in, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
After legumes, you did fruiting.
Yep. And then after fruiting, it'd be leafing, and then after leafing is roots.
And then back to legumes, and you could kind of rotate each section of your garden that way, and that felt like, oh, maybe we could do that. And How did that go?
Well, we had kind of thought maybe we'd do it like as quadrants, kind of like 1 quadrant for each section. And then, but then that also can get into issues with pests and such. If we have all our brassicas together, then all the cabbage moths can come in, and and things like that. And so we're not going to be perfect this year by any means. So we kind of started, and then we said, oh, well, some of these plants we want in sooner than others, some we want in later, and right now, with knowing that we have a lot to till up, and we have some things that we want in possibly before it's really good for tilling, we want areas that have been gardened before to be where our things we want in earlier are, so we have more time to get some of the other things in.
And so we also found that we really didn't have 4 equal, we have way more fruiting vegetables that we use, tomatoes and peppers and squash, than we have legumes, which the only legumes that we regularly grow are peas and beans. And actually last year was the first year we've ever successfully grown peas, and we're hoping to continue that, but it's not been a regular part of our garden.
Right.
So we couldn't do our quadrant method. We still sort of took some time to identify what everything was, but we didn't necessarily stick with that. We kind of still went with the, well, it wasn't there last year mentality as we outlined this.
Yep.
So,
and this year, kind of being our first with this strategy, we'll hopefully get a bit better as we go. And we will make adjustments through the year, I'm sure. I'm sure that what we have on paper here is not going to be the final. This is exactly how we do it in our garden.
And we can't even know that we'll get this number of rows in each section and that we'll have 50-foot sections like we're hoping to. But we are hoping to have kind of 3 50-foot sections in our main garden. We also have the farm garden, which isn't in here at all. We didn't necessarily map that out, but we do have a little bit of a mental picture of what we want.
Yeah, and we have a space out at my grandma's farm, about 20 minutes from here, where the last 2 years we planted our squash and our pumpkins there. And so we decided that we're not going to do squash and pumpkins in the same spot again. And so we're trying to do our tomatoes and peppers out there this year.
Yeah, and one of the big decision makers in what gets planted out at the farm is what can be left alone for several days in a row, because it is 20 or so minutes out and 20 or so minutes back in. And so that does kind of eat up some of the time that you could be working as well. So this year we are deciding to put our tomatoes and peppers out there, especially once they're established. They can go for a week without much attention. So out at the farm, as we were saying before our timer rudely interrupted us, we're planning on doing tomatoes and peppers, but we'll also throw in some flowers and probably basil and maybe even some other herbs. Is there anything else that you'd been anticipating out at the farm garden?
I think that's kind of it. Tomatillos.
Oh, yeah, we have tomatillos this year. I call those as tomatoes kind of in my head.
Well, we haven't tried them yet.
No, we don't know. That's one of our new things. And so then at the lot where we're going to have our bigger garden space, we're hoping to have 3 sections of 50-foot rows. And 2 of those, like the east side and the west side, will have more rows than our middle section just because of the layout of the land. And in the middle section, we're planning on putting the squash and pumpkins.
Yep. We're kind of thinking, our squash and pumpkins will be a similar setup to what we had the last couple of years, just in a different spot.
Now, pop quiz, what kind of squash are you planning on planting there? Can you list some of the varieties that you'd like to plant this year?
Well, number 1 is just a Connecticut pumpkin. That's kind of like our big, just normal jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. We also like the musky pumpkin. They get bigger and they have they're big and they're kind of flattish, but they have a very orange flesh, and those are my favorite for like pumpkin bread and pumpkin desserts and stuff. We also do Long Island cheese.
Those are my favorite for meal in a pumpkin.
Yep, we love to use those to put sausage and veggies inside and just pop it in the oven and it comes out as a meal. And then we also are doing several varieties of the mini pumpkins. And we talked about those some in our video about seeds.
Seed video. But we'll also have butternut squash, Seminole squash, which is similar to a butternut, and spaghetti squash this year, which we didn't grow last year.
Yeah, we're excited. We really missed our spaghetti squash this year.
So yeah, and then tell us about, is this the east side?
Yes, that's the east side.
Okay, tell us about the east side. Starting with what is at the back of the east side.
Yep, and so the east side is where our original garden was. The very first time we planted 9 years ago?
Beats
10
me.
years
I
ago?
can't count like that. I couldn't tell you what year it was.
I think this is our 10th year.
Woohoo!
And so that was about half of that space was our original space.
Half of what will be the east side?
Half of what will be the east side, yes. And so we're going to start with towards the back. We already have strawberries there. And we have 3 rows of strawberries. It's not full 50 feet wide. It's the width that we had this section last year, which is about 36 feet or so, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking 35 feet, yeah.
And so we have, I saved a few strawberry plants from last year. So we're hoping to kind of extend those rows out and have 3 rows of strawberry plants this year.
And it's not good to keep your strawberries in the same place every year necessarily either. Or to keep the same plants every year. They send off the new runners, and then we'll move those newer plants to a different section.
Yeah, we can keep strawberries. I think typically do their best in their second year, and we'll probably keep them for 3 years typically, and then we'll move other ones in and stuff.
So we'll be rotating through the strawberries as well. But
this
for now, they're in this.
Yeah, and this will be our second year with strawberries.
So hopefully we get to reap the benefit of a good second year. All right, what else are we planning to put on that east side?
So in front of the strawberries then will be our spinach, which we have 2 varieties of spinach that we've not had much luck with before. Last year was better than previous, and so we're hoping to kind of expand on that.
And I like to use spinach to eat fresh, but we can also freeze it or we can make pesto with it. So to me, it's a really versatile leafy green, and I enjoy that.
And then after that is kale and green onions. We've kind of, like I said, we felt like we didn't have enough space, so we kind of said, what can we combine in rows? At this point, we're not foreseeing needing a full row.
Sorry for the interruption again.
All right, go check the bread.
You were telling us about the kale and the green onions.
Yeah, and just how we have, we're combining some different rows together. We don't think that we'll need that much space for kale. Maybe we'll find out we need more. We can plant more later on or do more next year. And green onions,
they don't take up very much space.
Yes.
They're small.
So we'll try that. In front of the green onions, we have lettuce. And so you kind of see we have some of those leafy greens there kind of lumped together, but not all of them.
You'll see in a little bit that we have more.
Yeah. Last year, we did some row cover with our lettuce, could get it in earlier in the spring, and then it could stay later in the fall too.
And we're hoping to do that again because our midsummer is not good lettuce growing. So if we can take advantage of the spring and the fall, that will be really helpful.
Yep. In front of the lettuce, we have 2 rows of potatoes. We really like potatoes for ourselves. We share them with our CSA, but it's not necessarily as much of a cash crop as some of the others, at least in our experience.
And we might want to focus some of that on like storage potato versus maybe 1 row of storage potatoes and 1 row that is better for eating up sooner. We really like to have some storage vegetables for ourselves that don't require a lot of effort in preparing for storage. Like broccoli and green beans and cauliflower is kind of a lot of work to get into the freezer, or tomatoes to can, but potatoes are like you dig them and you store them.
In front of the potatoes, we'll have our carrots. In front of that, celery, and then some herbs with that too. We thought we want to use a full row of the celery. And also, I mean, we'll kind of sprinkle herbs in where they fit too, I think.
Yeah, we like to place herbs like wherever we can find a spot. Maybe we plant something and it dies, and rather than, bringing in another of that start, we'll put an herb in that spot.
And some herbs are good at
pest repellent.
Pest repellent, yeah. And then behind that we have cabbage, a row of cabbage, a row of cauliflower, and a row of broccoli. And this year we're going to try putting our radishes kind of in between the plants.
Those plants start out pretty small, and then over the spring they grow really large and take up a foot square to even bigger than a foot square. And so I thought if we could tuck in radishes, which are a pretty quick growing crop, they'll have room before the other plants kind of take over. So we're hoping that that will work.
We'll see how it goes. And then in front of that we have our onions and our garlic.
Which sadly, our garlic should be in the ground already, and it's not. We didn't get it in this fall. So we are hoping that will not hurt us too bad for this year.
All right.
And so that's the east side, and as we already talked about the middle, so go ahead and talk us through the west side. This time let's start at the front.
Okay, starting at the front of the west side, we're going to have peas. We'll have 2 rows of our peas. Last year we really liked them and it went really well. We're hoping to kind of keep that going. And then we have 3 rows of our green beans. And we do that more succession, so we're not going to plant them all at the same time, but we'll plant them 2 to 3 weeks apart.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks.
So then we can, through the summer, hopefully keep having some fresh green beans. Behind that will be our sweet potatoes. We have 2 rows of those. We really like sweet potatoes.
I love sweet potatoes so much.
And then behind that, we're going to have beets and turnips. That's another half row.
Those aren't like our most popular crops, but there are some people who really enjoy them, and we do appreciate exposing our family to them, even though they aren't necessarily our family's favorite. But when we made beets in the past, the girls actually did enjoy them pretty well.
And then we'll have cucumber. And a whole full row of cucumber seems kind of risky. We'll see.
We probably don't need that, but that's the way it looked for now.
And then behind that we'll have a row that has zucchini and eggplant.
Which is new.
We've never grown our eggplant before, so we'll see. And zucchini shouldn't need a full row, hopefully, assuming it's prolific.
Yeah, assuming the plants survive. Last year was a hard year for zucchini in our area, which is kind of funny because usually everybody has too much zucchini. One last check on the bread. Hopefully, half a row of zucchini will be plenty. And do we have a couple of varieties?
Yeah, we have 2 different varieties that we really like.
So that should give us enough room for that. And then
behind that we have watermelon. We do a bush baby watermelon that doesn't take up a ton of space. And I think that 150-foot row should be enough for us.
And the thing about watermelon is that no matter when you plant it, it sort of is all ripe at the same time.
That's at least our experience,
So we don't necessarily want more than 50 feet of watermelon because there's only, so much time to use it up.
Then we'll have cantaloupe behind that. And then behind the cantaloupe, we're gonna have our raspberries. We have raspberry plants. They're in a different spot. They're kind of back in the back corner of our lot.
And I think that they bother the neighbors a little bit.
Yeah,
so
our
we're
neighbors aren't too big of fans of them being right there.
Yeah, just because they're prickly and pokey and lean over the fence or whatever. So we're going to move them up to the garden area and try to rein them in a little bit and hopefully then reap a better harvest.
Yeah. Yep.
So lots and lots of work ahead of us. We also have remind everybody of the fruit trees that we have.
Okay, yes, we have.
Probably all need trimmed.
Yep, and we're working on getting better at figuring out exactly how to care for those in the best way possible. We have a peach tree, and then we have a pear tree, and 2 apple trees.
And at the house we have the sweet cherry tree.
Yep, and at our house we have a sweet cherry tree.
So yeah, that is kind of our big garden plan for the season. Yes. And
now you know everything about our garden, right?
Everything.
Like I said, our plan is subject to change.
Always.
But that's part of gardening, and we're excited. This is one of the most exciting parts of gardening is making the plan, and of course it's also exciting when you reap the harvest.
Yeah, I was like, what about when you eat the first pea or the first tomato, or you pull up the carrot and it's actually full size and not like this?
Yep. But yeah, it's fun that, it's snowing outside right now. And we're thinking about what we're going to be doing this spring, summer, and fall.
Yeah, and some of these things we hope to get in the ground as early as March.
Yeah. Yep.
And others are better in April. But we've got a lot of work to do to get to that point.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll check in with you later.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.